Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve. Right now, I have a cold that I'm getting over, and we know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with this. How do we find the solution? Where does that nudge come from to help us take the next step and start solving tough problems? This podcast is designed to help you find your catalyst and take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale. Today, I have Jerry Dugan on. Jerry is the author of Beyond the Rut. He has the Beyond the Rut podcast, and the conversation is awesome. We recorded it before I lost my voice, so the audio will be a little bit better. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did.
Jerry, it is awesome to see you. I have just finished your book because I was able to get it on Audible, and I've listened to it at 2x speed. So if I start pushing you along in the conversation, know that it's not you, it's me. And so I shared the story before we clicked live, but I ran into that with Jody way back when. And now I'm cognizant of it because I like to listen to things fast. And then when we get into conversation, I'm like, come on, get to the point, get to the point, get to the point. And then anyhow, so your book is phenomenal. And for those who've not read it yet, the book is Beyond the Rut. And I am talking to the author, Jerry Dugan. Jerry, why'd you write the book?
Oh, man. A couple of reasons. One, it was a long-time goal of the show. When there were three of us hosting the show, we said, after 1 year of this show, we're going to compile our lessons learned and have this manifesto we can give out to people to read and kind of spark them to change their lives, listen to the show, change their lives some more, that kind of thing. Well, over the last 7.5 years, the third guy on the team, he quit after 16 episodes. The founder of the team, he left 2.5 years ago. And I was just going through all the notes that we had, kind of regrouping, like, what was this show about? I still feel like I need to keep it going. And I came across the original business plan that said, goal number 1, after a year, we're going to write this book. And I'm like, I'm looking at my watch. I don't know why I was looking at my watch at the time, but I was like, my watch doesn't measure years. It's 7 years later, and we have not touched this book. And so I was challenged, like, get that book done. You know, people are going to notice it, be drawn to it, and be changed by it. So that was the first one. It was a goal that was sitting there. I really wanted to accomplish that goal, and I hadn't done anything to achieve it. The second thing is not everybody listens to podcasts, and more people read books, and we've been doing it for thousands of years. And just listening to the coaching groups I was in, they were saying, if you want your message to really get out there, you got to have it in different formats, multimedia. You are an instructional designer. You know this, multimodal learning. So you got the audio covered just fine. You don't have the time to do video, but put the book together. It's going to last longer. It's going to be evergreen, and you can share your insights learned from the show. And so that's my hope, that people get their hands on that book and they take a step towards living the life they've always dreamed of living without losing their faith or their family or their health or career in the process.
So let's talk about the coaching groups. So what kind of coaching groups are you a part of?
Oh man, now I'm in like 4 or 5 different ones. At the time I was in one, and I just felt like I can afford one. I can make the time for one. It was a Christian I'm still in this group. It's a Christian podcasters coaching group. So there's about anywhere from 8 to 15 of us who get on at any given week. And we just talk about 2 main things. How do we get more people to listen? And then how do we represent our show in a way that represents our faith, our Christian faith? And so you got folks that are truly just dedicated to talking about the Bible and church life. And then you got me. You know, I want to be in the secular world. I want to represent Jesus, but I don't want to thump people over the head with the Bible. And so I'm like the oddball in the group, which is interesting. And so they help me stay true to my message, to make an impact with my message. The downside of them is that they've got that limiting belief about money. And now we've got some new blood in the group that are like financial planners. And they're like, there's nothing wrong with having wealth. There's everything wrong with loving wealth more than God. And so that's one group I'm in. The networking group that you and I met in is the Phoenix Club, with Dan Cockrell had started and Jody's in. And Jody had invited me into that group pretty much the moment I left my corporate job just a few months ago. And he said, Jerry, I know you're looking to network again. You're getting out from underneath that rock you've been living under. If you want to meet some cool guys that are very similar to you and like-minded and building a business, but it's not really a coaching group or a mastermind, here's a networking group to try out. And he told me who the people who are in it. I'm like, oh, wow, that's where everybody hangs out? I'm in. And then turns out Jody got a lot of work done through Vincent Puglisi's mastermind group, Total Life Freedom. And then Vincent reached out to me, gave me a free book. We chatted. And then he was like, hey, I know you're hanging out with Jody these days. And so I'm in that group, just learning the business side of things and just generating business ideas. I never really thought about monetization of my platform until 6 months ago. And so they get my creative wheels going. And I'm finally at the point of like, okay, so how do I make money at this? Because my wife and I are looking at the budget and we're like, okay, we gotta start earning revenue. And so those are the three main ones. And then around marketing my podcast. So if there's one area I've really suffered in the last 9 years of podcasting, it's telling people I have a podcast, oddly enough. And so the Cap Show Collective, you're a part of the Cap Show platform. I'm in a smaller group called the Collective. And they talk about not just the platform, but they talk around marketing your social media. What are the top performing podcasters doing that the low performing podcasters aren't? And so I've learned a lot about being more effective and intentional with my social media marketing, my email messaging, how I phrase things, how I time things to go out there, how to mix things up, how to leverage the tools that I have, not just Cap Show, but, so what I've seen is more interaction, more engagement in my social media than ever before. And I think that's the 4. And then I joined a 5th one around marketing my business. So BTR Impact, doing leadership development. It's like, okay, I know the content. I know how to do training facilitation, but how the heck do I get CEOs to sign off on having me to come in and do workshops and speak at their leadership development events and all that stuff? And I'm like, I don't know how to package any of that. So I'm in a small group that focuses on that. And so it's, I guess, 5.
So how did you stumble into learning and development after being a medic in the services?
Man. It was first job out of the Army.
Yeah.
In the Army, I could do all the cool things you see in the movies. In Three Kings, putting a needle into somebody's chest so they don't have pulmonary pneumothorax and they keep their trachea in line and not have, go to one side or the other. I knew how to do that. I could, I assisted with like chest tubes. I could, keep you from bleeding out if possible, because it turns out you don't have a lot of control over that. If somebody's going to bleed out, they're going to bleed out. This got really dark. Sorry about that, Mike.
Get dark.
Yeah.
These are lessons. These are lessons that like there's an intensity that you've had an opportunity to operate in that I have never operated in. Like, I used to joke, and my background, my first entry into learning and development and really into ed tech was a company called SmartForce, which was a pioneer of e-learning. And then we were acquired by Skillsoft. They called it a merger of equals, but Skillsoft is that 800-pound gorilla out in the marketplace. And there are a number of different offshoots that are out there. But we would joke about it and say, look, nobody is going to die if we aren't successful with this implementation or all those kind of things. And then the follow-up would be, well, I guess if forklift safety is part of the OSHA stuff that we're learning and someone has not been properly trained or lockout, tag out, then somebody could potentially die. But you were dealing with people who are literally going to bleed out or are in high intense operating environment where there's a significant amount of risk and we can't sit around and deliberate around what action to take. We have to make decisions and take action.
Yeah.
I've never operated in that kind of environment. What's it like?
It's scary. And at the same time, Army training actually was probably my first introduction unknowingly into learning psychology, because, in the movies, they always talk about like, you're going to basic training and this stranger gets on the bus with a round brown hat and starts calling you maggot and filth and you spineless bastards and, get off my bus. You're ruining and stinking up my bus. Get off, get lined up. And you're just like, and there's stress. And people on the outside looking in are like, why are they always yelling at you? Why do they disrespect you? Why are they like, just in your face and trying to tear you down? And later on, I learned when I was going after my master's in instructional design, educational technology, and one of the things they talk about in like trauma is that your memories get locked in based on the state of mind that you're in. So, if you're under a traumatic event, you're going to remember all the details very vividly, whereas you kind of forget once you calm back down. If you're drunk and you study, they don't like you to know this in college, but chances are you're going to do better in your class if you've had a drink or two because you learned all the content while you were drinking. You're probably going to recall that information better while you're drinking. So you want to be in that state of mind where you're going to actually be in the field. So in the military, a lot of training is done under stress and duress. So why are they feeding the Rangers only one meal a day? Because in the real world, they're going to be go, 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 go in the battle. They're not going to have time to say, hey, hold on a sec. It's time for lunch. everybody stopped shooting. It's like, no, they might go 36 to 48 hours without being able to sit down and take a meal in. So they got to be able to just go and be used to that. All the things that we need to learn in the Army are going to be under stress and combat conditions. So they yell at you. They might have you do classroom work.
Okay.
They're going to test you out under stress,
Sure.
shooting blanks over your head, popping off smoke simulators, grenade simulators, just yelling at you, being in your face and getting you to answer right away. And the funny thing is, like, when the course is over, you forget almost all of it. You're like, I don't remember how to dig a foxhole. I don't remember how to, do a tourniquet. I remember feeling that before we crossed into the border into Iraq on March 19th, 2003. I'm like, I've forgotten almost everything I learned as a medic. But then the weird thing was, like, when I had my first mass casualty event, it was like 6 civilians, 5 of them at first, and then 1 right after that.
Okay.
I remember having this moment of panic, like, holy crap, they need to call the medic over here. This is bad. And I realized, wait, I am the medic. And as soon as I said that to myself, wait, I am the medic, everything clicked. And this lieutenant apparently was right there in my face, like, Doc, what do you need from us? Doc, how can we help you? And like, somebody on the checkpoint was dropping civilians next to me, like on Forrest Gump, when Forrest Gump is like dropping down Dallas and Tex and Cleveland all side by side. And he goes back to get Lieutenant Dan. Like, that's how they were dropping these civilians next to me. Wow. And they had like bullet holes all over the place, shrapnel wounds and so on. And I remember just being in a shock to me, it felt like forever. Lieutenant Rivera, who was kind of giving me the debrief after, he was like, you were a badass in that. I'm like, I was? He goes, yeah, like, you just snapped right into gear. You told me you needed combat lifesavers to help you out. They all panicked. So you just said, give me your bags. And they did. And you were just directing people around. You were telling people you needed litters. Somebody go on the other side of the checkpoint and commandeer an ambulance from the local population. Find out where did you know you drafted 3 reporters to help you? I was like, well, I remember telling a guy I needed a translator. They're like, yeah, they gave you their translator. And then all of a sudden the reporter, like, one of them is like digging in and doing whatever you're telling him. And like, all these things happened. And I wound up treating 6 people, getting them onto a civilian ambulance and off to a hospital. And I thought about that. And I was like, how did I know to do all those things? And the reality was, I had been taught while I was under stress. And so here I was in that moment of stress again, and it all clicked and it all just happened. It was just, and we'd practiced it. My lieutenant, a different guy, Lieutenant Hanvey, my battalion surgeon, he was a big fan of, the Army doesn't just train you to get it right. They train you to fail and then learn from your failure. Yeah. So really good training exercises, you die in all of them. And then you get to debrief. Why did you die? Doc, why did all your guys in that squad die? And you're like, well, turns out I wasn't strong enough to lift the 250-pound guy up the hatch. Great. What are your alternatives? And I'm like, well, there's a side hatch, it turns out, on this thing. Yeah. Do you know how to operate that? I do now. And so you start learning where your weak points are, where your strengths are, what your alternatives are. And so, like, in panic moment, going back into Baghdad, and that Lieutenant Rivera is asking me, what do you need from me? And I'm sitting there thinking, I know I can't treat everybody myself. Well, I trained up every first aid person. Like, there's one person, every crew in every vehicle who knows how to do first aid because of me. Give me all the ones you can spare. And they came out, and then of course they panicked. I'm like, well, I know you all packed bags for first aid supplies.
Right.
So give me those. And from there, I started, assessing what do they still remember? What do they feel comfortable with? And so they didn't feel comfortable actually doing the treatment, but they understood still how to use all the equipment. So I'm now leveraging them to prepare litters, prepare bandages, prepare the IV bags. And they felt comfortably, with all those things in the moment. So all I had to do was like grab a needle, stick, I'm still doing the motions, get the catheter in there, hold down the blood vessel with my pinky, attach, tape, and then open. I'm like, great, now hold that and just start squeezing it. And then, taped it on, boom, next guy, boom, took care of him, got him all bandaged up. They rolled these guys on the litters, carried them over, got them on an ambulance, and off they went. And of course, the news reporters, after we were done, they're like, we got to go find out where those ambulances went because there's a story there. And they actually got to fill us in on the next day of what happened. How did these guys get hurt? What was the outcome? Turns out all 6 lived. I even did casualty cards, which the leaders in that company or that battery were giving me a hard time. Like, Doc, you're sending them off to Iraqi hospitals. They don't understand these. I'm like, you never know. And so
what's a casualty card?
So it's just a 1-page slip.
Okay.
That has like a silhouette of a human body, front and back.
Okay.
And you just start putting X's where the wounds are.
Cool.
So I was like dotting, boom, all over the body where somebody had shrapnel on their chest. Somebody had shrapnel all over their leg. I wrote down how many IVs I gave each person as far as units.
Yep.
And then that was about it. I didn't use any actual English words, but I knew a lot of these guys, they study in the US.
Okay.
So they probably know English. Like I remember that from training. But I remember Gunny, he was just like, Doc, you're sending them off to Iraqi hospitals. They're not going to know these cards. I'm like, you never know. And so I filled them out. And you twist tie them on. They got like copper wire. And you twist tie them onto the person. So it's on them while they go to wherever they're going. And it turns out that helped. People understood like, hey, this guy came in. He's like riddled with shrapnel from the waist down. And they knew to focus on that. They still checked everything else. But sure enough, like once they saw the first patient truly was documented, they were able to treat all the other 5 very quickly and get them the help they needed, get them into surgery. They were all healing just fine and on the road to recovery.
It's amazing what happens when you communicate with clarity and set expectations, what people who have an expertise can do with that when it gets in front of them. Like you can, you demonstrate leadership there, even in an environment where you weren't able to lead directly because you weren't in the next room with people.
Yes. And, I talk a lot about servant leadership. So like 2 topics are like living a life worth living and servant leadership. And that was my exposure. I had a lot of exposure to servant leadership. But in that situation, Captain Giles was really the guy in charge of everything. But, he had delegated to Lieutenant Rivera to be in charge of the checkpoint that day. Well, in that moment, Lieutenant Rivera put me in charge, Sergeant Dugan, multiple levels below him. And, he still maintains security. He's like, hey, I still maintain security, but what other resources do you need? You tell me what you need. I will make it happen. And it was that empowerment, that delegation of power and authority, and like everything I asked for, he made happen. And right down to commandeer an ambulance. Somebody point out, hey, there's an ambulance that drives by like every 10 minutes. I was like, great, snag it. And sure enough, and we're like, well, how do we snag them without scaring them? Because we're not kidnapping them. We're not arresting them. We're not going to kill them. And that's where that Italian news crew reporter had gone and interpreted there as well. And it was just a really neat experience. Took a lot of lessons from that. And, even on resupply, and my battalion surgeon gave me a hard time at first because I did technically disobey a direct order because he said, since we aren't the ones who shot them, we have no obligation to treat them. Don't treat them, because now you're going to be in for it. You're obligated to make sure they're safe. And I remember that order coming in over the radio, and Lieutenant Rivera was like, yeah, I didn't hear that. Did you, Doc? I'm like, hear what, sir? and so we went ahead and started treating. So it was like, also having that trust that on the ground, better what's happening than somebody miles and miles away. And even though Lieutenant Henry gave me a hard time, he did say, but you know what? If I was in your shoes on site, I would have done the same thing. So now that I chewed your butt because I'm required to as your battalion surgeon, here's what I really think. So walk out of this tent like I chewed your butt out, but no, deep down inside, you did the right thing. I was like, wow, okay. And then we stop it here. And I was like, cool. And it was just really neat to have that butt chewing, but like what Michael Hanvey really thought was different than what Lieutenant Hanvey was required to tell me. So
you went through this situation, and thanks for the description, because you described it in a way where we could feel the things that are happening around you. Very few people have had an opportunity to go through that kind of thing. Yet, a lot of people out there find themselves stuck in a rut.
Oh, yeah.
And you have even found yourself stuck in a rut after that experience. So you've demonstrated capability to work through problem solving, decision making, and execution in a high intense environment, yet still have found yourself caught in a roadside ditch or a rut at some point in the future. Why do people get stuck in ruts?
I think it starts off with just being in a comfort zone. Like we work so hard to make things easier, and then we get there and like, yes. My first job out of the Army was doing learning and development for a healthcare organization. So I guess now we finally answer that question. How did I get into learning and development? Yeah. It was the first job that would pay the bills. and it leaned on my leadership skills. It leaned on the military style of leadership and, setting the conditions, setting training environments that really fit the need of the person. But 2 years into that job, I realized I'm in the rat race. I just survived combat 2 years ago. I went through the most intense thing I will probably ever go through the rest of my life. And I did that in my 20s. I am now 30 years old or about to be 30 years old. And my life, if nothing changes, is rack up credit card debt, work my butt off all year to pay off the credit card debt. And then Christmas comes and I just renew the credit card debt and repeat. And it doesn't matter how much money I earn, how much growth in income I have. We're just going to swell and fill that void. And I just realized we need to change. I need to change. Our mindset around money needs to change. Our mindset around career growth, all these things need to change. But how did I get here? And it was like, I am being paid more than I've ever been paid before. And it was only like $40,000 a year, which for a lot of folks, that's a lot. Sure. And for me, that was a lot. And I was like, yeah, we can like have a car and a car payment. We can have cable TV and internet and computers and cell phones and a roof over our head and all the food we want to eat. Like we have all these things. And to get more, we started using credit. And, we were already using credit and it just maxed everything out. And now I was stuck. It's like, I don't like my job. I got a new boss. It's really not going to work out. Doesn't matter what I say or do or how much I comply. This person is set in her ways. And so, but at the same time, I've got this credit card debt. I got a car payment and a mortgage and I can't leave my job. And I live in Corpus Christi. If I want to find a job just like this, there aren't many of them and they aren't vacant either. So we either have to move or I got to do something different. And then I got fired. It's like, oh, I don't have a choice now. I am now unemployed and need to find something.
Sometimes decisions are thrust upon you.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah. So I became a real estate agent, had a first good year, market tanked, but then I stayed stubborn. We got very broke very fast and struggled for about 4 years. And so that let us know what rock bottom felt like and, what it's like to have to sell plasma, even just to put food on the table that day. Or I don't know if I put it in the book, but there was a time, and this was like a big heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching moment. I had just finished showing property to a client and I ran out of gas. I just managed to push the car into a gas station, had no money. There was nothing in the bank account. I already knew that, but I didn't have any money on me, no cash. But I knew that my wife had the other car and in the house was a big jar of change. And she put all that change into a big freezer bag and drove that out to me. Yeah. And I was able to put gas in the car. And she just said, Jerry, something's got to change. And as she's handing me a bag full of change.
Sure.
And so it gave me enough gas to get home. Yeah. And then I started thinking, gosh, what do I do to put more gas in this car so I can show property and all this stuff? And I just realized I got to give plasma. And, then I learned about my health. I was like, you can't give plasma today. I'm like, why not? It's too cloudy. Look, I'm like, what makes it cloudy? And they said, well, what did you eat for breakfast? I was like, bacon. They're like, well, can you not eat the bacon taco before you come in? Eat it after as a reward or something. And I was like, okay, great. And then I'd come in not hydrated. And they're like, we can't get enough volume out of you to actually do anything. Come back when you've had water. And I have to come back days later. And like, these were things that were costing me $35 at a time. And so it was just like, okay, our mortgage is way more than a unit of plasma every week. We got to generate more income. And so I just learned how to get humble, meet the needs of the family first, and then pursue my dream after that, or even put the dream on the back burner.
Yeah. And
it was, I wouldn't say humiliating, but it was humbling.
When I read the plasma story, I thought, wow, there's something Jerry and I have in common. And it's humbling. It's humiliating. It's also an opportunity to demonstrate resilience and a commitment to do the things that are necessary in order to eat. And now, when I did it, I was at ASU. I was a student at ASU. And for whatever reason, I made it through the gates, even though there was stuff I was drinking that, maybe it was because I didn't have as much bacon back then because I couldn't afford it, but I still was able to get Keystone Light. So but the thing that jumped out at me inside the book, as you shared various stories, not only your stories, but stories of guests who joined you on the podcast, is how many times are out there where each of us share a component of the same story. The characters might change a little bit. The operating environment that we're working in might change a little bit, but the theme around struggle is still the same. The theme around the dark voices and the limiting beliefs that are out there are still the same, the things that get in the way. And what I really jumped out at me early on in the book, and this is one of the notes I took, was around the importance of asking questions. Because as you were going through it, you were constantly asking these questions around who, what, why, where, when, how, where do things go? But just the importance of asking questions. So where does this importance of asking questions come from for you? And comfort level in asking those questions, because some of them are really deep and hard to ask, especially if you're sitting in a really dark place.
Yeah, it probably goes as far back as when I was 11 years old, if not younger. My mom was a very strict tiger mom, stereotypical tiger mom from Thailand. And I just remember her being strict all the time. You got to go to school, you got to get good grades, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to join the Army, because in her narrow view of the U.S., all the people who were successful were Army doctors. And I'm like, there's a whole bigger world out there, Mom. But I'd ask why. Why is this so important to her? Why is it important for me to do this? My friends are out there having fun. And just seeing that discrepancy, like I'm having to do this while everybody else is enjoying this. When my parents divorced, my dad got suicidal, and fortunately he failed at it and he got the help he needed. And we moved back to California with our extended family, and that's where my dad's getting the support he needs. And while he's getting that, I'm getting bullied by an uncle, some cousins, their friends, kind of like the laughingstock / weird guy in the family. And it's just kind of a hard place. And I'm thinking, why is this? I know suicide and checking out of this life is not an option for me because I've seen my dad go through it and I don't want to. But I know this life isn't worth pursuing. If all we have to look forward to is living on welfare, hating life, hating each other, having failed relationships, I don't think that's the way to live. And I've now had a taste of our foster family when my dad was getting help was a very healthy, well-knit, tightly knit family unit.
Yeah.
And that gave me a taste of what could be. Paying attention to my friends, that they loved going on family vacations in middle school and high school. They looked forward to Christmas. They looked forward to Easter. And I was like, that's so weird because I don't. And because of where I'm going is my grandparents' house and I'm going to be bullied for the whole weekend. And so that got me asking, what is different? What is it I want in life? Where am I right now? And what more is there? What do I want for me? What does success look like for me? And that just over time just started to grow. I'm pursuing a degree as a pre-med student to become a doctor. And I realized after I'm out of the Army, that wasn't my dream. That was my mom's dream. So what is it I want to do? Being in the rat race, it's like, I don't want to live the rest of my life. Let's assume I die at the age of 80. If I'm lucky to go that far, is this all I have to look forward to? Is the next, what's the math on this? 35 to 40 years of my working life just to pay off debt for somebody else and give up on the things I want? What are the things I want? And so I had to really map those things out. I left the Army because I knew I needed to be with my family. When they started handing out awards and started telling stories like, hey, do you remember when Sergeant Dugan did this or he did that? And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to survive a second deployment. There is no way. If that is me, there's no reason why I should be here right now receiving this award. I should be in a body bag, in a casket. And no, I'm not surviving another deployment. I just know it. And so I got out of the Army because being with my family was more important. But even thinking ahead, what if I don't die and I have a 20-year career, multiple deployments, lots of awards on my chest, but I lose my family twice over in the process? I've got kids now. I don't want to lose them. Not that I got kids now and I have to give up my dreams. It was like my dream was to be a dad who's connected with them and a part of their lives. And, they're adults now and I'm still a part of their lives. I'm like, okay, that was part of my dream. I'm living it. And so it's just like, what are those elements of success? What does success really look like for me? Not somebody else's version, but mine. And that just drives me, not just then, just a few months ago. I left probably the best career I had in terms of pay, title, team I'm leading, impact I was having, just to realize it was taking a toll on my health and my relationships. And having my life framed the way I do with the 5 F's really helped me make that decision. I do need to leave this job. And it's not worth going into to try to fix. It can't be fixed. I even thought through those things. So
you hit on a couple of the F's. One F that you haven't hit on yet is fitness. And you talk about being I forget how you phrase it, something like ultralight backpacking.
Yes.
Is that right? Oh, so an ultralight backpacker. For those who are not ultralight backpackers or maybe not backpackers at all, what's an ultralight backpacker? What's that mean?
Yeah. So backpacking is, I guess, already a crazy way of camping. A lot of the people I know who go camping do what I call glamping, or in Texas, we call glamping. You show up with your car or your RV. My brother does glamping. He shows up with a trailer and pretty much his living room is in the trailer. It's got power. It's got a flat screen TV, video games, air conditioner unit, a bed. And so that's kind of an extreme case, but that's camping for him. Backpacking is when you say, I'm going to go into the woods and the only stuff I'm bringing with me is the stuff I could put on my back in a pack. And the typical pack weight is around 35 to 45 pounds.
Okay.
So tent, sleeping bag, clothing, food, water, fuel, all those things. But without the food, fuel, and water, a typical backpacker will have about 35 to 45 pounds on his or her back. And you see it, the big giant packs that are real puffed out and everything. An ultralighter says, that's cool, but I know I'll move further, faster, and get no blisters if my pack weight, not counting food, water, and fuel, is under 10 pounds. And to get there, you start shaving off like you really start asking yourself, what are the things I don't need? And you realize I don't need a change of clothes for every single day. I don't need the full tube of toothpaste. I just need enough for the 2 or 3 days I'm out there or the week. I don't need fully hydrated food. I can take dehydrated food. I don't need to carry 5 gallons of water. I can carry 1 liter at a time, filter what I need. You start like asking yourself, what are the things I'm carrying already that I can get rid of? And the more confident you get in your skills and more confident you get in your equipment, you start scaling back on the things you don't need. You start scaling back on fears and you start having more confidence. And what you wind up with is a base weight of about 10 pounds or less. And then you add your food and stuff. So my typical pack will weigh with food, water, everything, about 13 to 15 pounds. Without the food, water, and fuel, it's about 9 to 10 pounds. And always looking for ways to make it lighter. My pack I look ridiculous when I go backpacking with my friends because they got these full packs and I look like I've got a kid's backpack on. And they're like, you got everything in there? I'm like, yeah, for 5 days. Yeah. What are you going to sleep in? I got a hammock. How are you going to stay warm? I've got a 40-degree sleeping bag, but it's going to get down to 15 degrees. Yeah, I've got layers. And it's just like, I've got a system for everything. I got a process for everything. I've got confidence in how all these things integrate together so I can move further, faster, lighter, experience more, and not get blisters. My shoes look completely different than everybody else's. People got full on like leather hiking boots that cover their ankles. I've got these like knit running shoes. And people are like, you're going to twist an ankle. I'm like, no, I won't. And they're like, why not? My pack is so light. I don't even realize it's there. Yeah. So that's ultralight backpacking. It's just going lighter, faster, further, enjoying more of the sights and getting to all those like cool milestones at the end of each trail.
And for the people who are out there listening, if you're sitting here at the table with us and you're thinking, why the heck are we talking about backpacking? Here's some dots that I would connect right away. Think about the things that you can eliminate in the work that you're doing today to improve the experience that you have in the work and the experience that your customers have in the work, both internal and external customers. As you start eliminating those things, there's a Bruce Lee quote that it'll come to mind at some point. It's something like, take all the information in, eliminate what is unnecessary, and then make it your own. Imagine if you made your pack, your ultralight pack that you take into the work that you do every day, your own, based on learning whatever you can, eliminating whatever is unnecessary, and then making it your own based on the experience that you want, whether it's walking around with a kid's backpack or something else. But we can eliminate tools and resources and things and actually perform a heck of a lot better and maybe enjoy the experience. Is that fair?
Oh, yeah, that's totally it. I mean, it's, for me, it's that framework of the 5 F's. What are the things most important to me? It's my faith, family, fitness, finances, and my future growth, future possibility. And, anything that doesn't support those 5 areas of my life don't need to be there. And it goes everything from subscriptions to involvement in events. I talked about being in 5 coaching groups right now or mastermind groups.
Yep.
I get invitations for so many more. But I had to think about, okay, am I getting the support I needed? Yes. Do I have to be in everything? No. Am I okay with that? Also, yes. And especially conferences. I'm a big conference junkie.
Okay.
And I only go to like 1 or 2 a year. So it forces me to think about what is the most supportive, impactful conference I could go to. And then I got to say no to the rest. And, again, the job, was taking a toll on my family. In fact, specifically my marriage, to the point where my kids who are adults are asking my wife, are you and dad okay? Because we saw how dad's interacting with all of us and he just doesn't seem happy anymore. Is he not happy with us and what's going on? And my wife was like, no, he hasn't realized how much his job sucks and how much it's taken a toll on him. But it was also an eye opener for her and for her to share that with me. I was like, my job, it's a 6-figure income. That's the most anybody in my family has ever earned. It's a director role. I've got a team of people who respect me and report to me. I make an impact in the organization and the community through this job, but it is not worth my family. And, this job will come and go. That family is what I want to be around when I die. That I want them to be able to come to my funeral and say, I love that guy. He was a big part of my life. My job's not going to care. People from the job might show up to my funeral, and so this might be the morbid, darker side of me is like, what do I want my life and my impact and my legacy to be after I'm gone? And how does that relate to those 5 F's? And that's I kind of like backwards plan from there. Like in the long run, is this going to matter and influence this vision I have for after I'm gone and this legacy I want to build? And if it's not supporting of that, I trim it out and I'm totally okay with it.
What was the internal self-talk that you were saying to yourself at the point while you're in the thick of not realizing how bad the job sucked, but you were justifying it? What did that internal self-talk look like as you were justifying it?
A lot of pride, because very specifically, my job is leading a team of people who go into other departments where the leadership is toxic, the work environment is toxic. And we help those leaders do things, make changes so that it's a safe environment for the employees, that trust is built, trust is sustained and grows so that the team is cohesive and impactful. That was our job. Yet I couldn't do that in my own department, and it wasn't from myself to my employees. It was kind of upward, and just realizing that I had a leader who was willing to bypass me to exert his control, that he was willing to gaslight everybody, that it didn't matter what I brought up. I was not experienced enough to understand. It was very condescending. And I just thought, well, if I was a better leader, if I was better at the work I do, I could influence this guy to see the light. And that was 3 years of trying. And when you have your team come up to you and say, look, we're all looking for jobs and it's not because of you. When your family comes up to you and says, Dad, are you okay? Are you going to leave Mom? That's like, uh-oh. And then when coworkers and peers are coming to you and saying, we love the work you do, we don't understand why we don't see more of it. Or people coming up like, what do you even do? And realizing, oh, I'm kept in a closet and hidden from everybody. Like all those pieces came together and it allowed me to shift away from what I was telling myself. I'm not good enough and I need to be better to fix this thing. And I got to stick around. I can't just job hunt. I can't just quit. I'm a leader. So all the things that everybody was counting on for me to do to be great at what I do. And I was using that to justify staying where I was.
What was the thing that point where you finally said, I don't need to justify this anymore. This is the wrong place for me. There's something else I can be doing out there. I actually can apply some of the things I'm leading and coaching others in the organization on how to do to myself. What was the thing when did that switch flip?
Yeah, I was actually taking that. It was Labor Day weekend. Big event just happened within my team that blew things up. And I spent that Labor Day weekend in prayer, in meditation, in thought, reflection. And so I was already getting a feel that I needed to leave. But my pride was saying, no, but you're the director of this team. Your job is to be able to influence this change and fix this. So the crux was my wife telling me, hey, just quit. I want my Jerry back. And when she said that, that was my eye opener. Like, what do you mean? I'm here. I'm here every day. Like we're living the empty nester life. And she said, that's when she told me about the feedback from our kids, that they had just recently visited us and they'd asked, Mom, are you and Dad okay? And that was the moment. It was like, so I was now in the next F of this evaluation of how things going in my life. Yeah. And right there, right off the bat, the second highest priority of my life is telling me, you're not you. And we don't like it. We want you to be happy. We want you to be fulfilled. We want you to live up to what your show is about. It was like, wow, you guys listen to the show? No, but we know what your show's about because you talk about it all the time. I'm like, okay, fair enough. And so I didn't have to go any further, but then I started examining fitness and we realized I'd put on 40 pounds in the last year. Yeah. And I was like, why? I mean, I'm stress eating. Okay. I'm trying to retreat when I need to be getting out there and I'm working out mostly, but I avoid that too. It's like, so there was that. And then finances were fine. So we knew we weren't in trouble there. And then future possibility, if nothing changed, so then I get to the final F. If nothing changes, what do I have to look forward to? Yeah. And I didn't like what I had to look forward to if I stayed. And we got to talk to some different executives in HR outside the organization. And they were just like, look, we're listening to you. We checked out your show. We're looking at your LinkedIn profile. You really should start a business now. Think about it. You've got a talent. You got a passion. Go for it. Now's the time to do it because companies that may be downsizing still want training. They still want development. They just can't afford a full internal team. And you got an expertise that you can share with them. And besides, you're in learning and development. You're going to be in high demand. So if your business doesn't work, I probably have a job for you. I was like, okay, well, I'll go for it. So yeah, that evaluation really was something I went through over the course of a long weekend. And yeah, the day I put in my resignation, my team told me, Jerry, you're a whole different person now. Like the guy that came in when he started his first day, that's who we're seeing right now. Within a week, my wife's like, got my Jerry back. And I was like, okay, good. So this is worth it. So that was a big shift. I mean, we're leaving really the golden handcuffs, because when we shared this with other people, they're like, well, what are you going to do for money? And my wife's like, weird thing is, Jerry's been saving like emergencies and we got a 6-month nest egg. And then when we time it right, we actually can go about 8 months and not freak out. And they're like, really? And it was just like, we were doing things differently. And that gave us the freedom to leave a toxic environment.
So for somebody who, well, first off, go read the book, and you can use Jerry's 5 F's as a framework to help organize thinking and questions around each of these areas. If someone says, faith is not for me, or family is not for me, or just any of these, fitness is not for me, or future growth is not for me, whichever one they decide is not for them, how can somebody go through and think about identifying those couple of things that are important to them? Like, people will talk about mind, body, spirit, work, home, as another group. You've got your 5 F's. Everybody has them, but they may not know that they have them. So what's the first step for people to figure out what those things are if they haven't sat down and started putting that together yet?
Yeah. For me, of course, I'm still going to be a big fan of the 5 F's, but
sure,
I think I say it in the book, like, if you're not a religious person, swap that faith out of a religious faith to what is your cause? What is the change or the impact you want to have in the world in a big way? So that when people think about you after you're gone, it's like, I remember that guy. He was all about making sure the hungry were fed, or always about respecting each other regardless of their status in the community. Like, what's your thing you want to be known for and the change you want to make in the world? That could be your faith. Family, you may not be married with kids. My target audience is. And now my actual audience is a whole variety of folks. But family could be the relationships that are most closest to you. So your friends, coworkers, if you're like in a, firefighter, first responder type of environment where it's a very tight-knit team, that could be your family. That could be your circle. But you need people in your life. You need to be social. You got to have those relationship connections. Fitness, I think, should still be at the center, the core, because you got to be emotionally, spiritually, and physically fit to be able to do this effectively. Finances are going to be an influence, but I don't put it top of mind. It's to remind you that your higher purpose, your family, or your relationships, and your health are more important than the actual money you make or the career path you have gone on to pursue. And then just keep growing for the future. I think anybody can grow and keep growing. Meditation's a great way, reflecting on things, learning new things, new skills, being open-minded to what else is out there besides your own echo chamber or comfort zone. And so, the first 2 you can change out for whatever your situation is. The last 3, I think you should just keep. It's a good balance.
Jerry, awesome conversation. Where should people go to find out more about what you're working on? Where should we send people?
Oh, man. I think beyondtherut.com is probably the easiest because it's just habit to say it. Beyondtherut.com, you'll find the podcast, the book. I think I have a speaking link that takes you to my other website. BTR Impact is my actual business of doing leadership development focused on servant leadership, and my speaker page is there. So if you want me to speak, BTR Impact. If you forget all that, beyondtherut.com.
Awesome. If you know somebody who would get value out of this conversation, please share it with them. Let Jerry and I know via LinkedIn, Twitter, all the socials, whichever social you're operating on. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?